I saw value in what SourcePoint once stood for and could stand for and now will stand for again. I think Josh said it perfectly. SourcePoint wasn't the company. It was a brand under Oxeye Media. I said, come here, baby. Come here. And I took the brand and dusted off. And they said, we're going to bring you back.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, Adam, and you saw this too. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I will say at Retailer Day at New York Comic Con,
yep,
so many people were excited to hear SourcePoint Press is going back to the roots.
Yeah.
And now we can provide that opportunity to other creators to, again, exist in that model we talked about earlier. And now we can pay it forward. And now we can grow things. And there's value in that name, and there's value in what it stood for. I'm not trying to crap all over that third act of the old SourcePoint. But it wasn't what the company was beloved for, respectfully.
What happens when a beloved indie publisher dies on paper only to come back sharper? This week we're talking to SourcePoint Press, an unapologetically weird, wonderful home for independent graphic novels that has gone through many bounds of drama. This is Comic Industry Insiders. No, it is not a gardening program. I'm just behind on my chores because of all the travel. This week, I'm talking to SourcePoint Press. Two fellas, Josh Werner and Gerk Manning, who have been through the ringer of indie press and have decided to not let go of a stalwart, but instead bring it back as something weirder and more exciting. If you make, sell, or distribute indie comics, this episode is just for you. It is a field guide for surviving all of the things that the business of art brings your way, including rising paper costs, bankruptcies, and people who really just want you to sell away your rights. Before I go any further, it should be noted that SourcePoint is a client of Prana Direct Market Solutions, the company that I work with. They were the first that we were able to announce under the Prana Publishers banner, a group that we use to get distribution for companies that would not be able to get there otherwise. Joining me this week are two people at the center of this conversation. Josh Werner, the editor-in-chief of SourcePoint, the co-founder of the original SourcePoint, and Gerk Manning, the incredibly well-crafted personality and creator and writer of many, many, many comics himself, including Mr. E and Nightmare World and something like 36 others. Rather than spend any more time telling you about what you're going to see in this episode, I'm going to get back to my chores. But you should sit and listen to this incredibly insightful, incredibly valuable conversation with two people who have bucked the odds and made a living and a business out of independent press. Please enjoy Josh Werner and Gerk Manning of SourcePoint Press.
Josh, Gerk, thank you guys for jumping in. It's so good to see you this evening. How are y'all feeling?
Hey, happy to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
of course.
Man. What you're doing with the show just continues to be amazing, and appreciate you having us both on. And I think, as you said before the show, this is the first time Josh and I ever really had a chance to see each other in a month, just due to the crazy convention schedule and stuff. So it's nice that you brought the business partners back together after a crazy 4 weeks.
I'm happy to be that median between the two of you. That even though Gerk, you and I keep seeing each other in different states, I think it's nice to.
Everywhere you go, I'm like a bad penny. I just keep turning up.
Hey, ain't that the truth? Let's start with what is SourcePoint Press, and why is it so important in a year like we're having right now?
You know, I think we've kind of come up with like our new tagline here for SourcePoint Press, which is, and this alludes to what you talked about in the introduction, you know, comics with a sharp edge, right? First and foremost, there's so many creators out there doing so much cutting edge work that we want to be able to be a place that they can help get that work out there. Also, in full transparency, and I know we're going to have a lot of transparency during this interview today, as a creator, and now that also serves as publisher, I wanted to create an opportunity, just like I have had and carved out for myself for the last 2 decades, to other creators. Meaning, you own all your own IP, you literally own all your own stock, you get to keep the profit on books you sell on your own through Kickstarter, crowdfunding, conventions, and things like that. So really, to me, when the opportunity came up, and I know we're going forwards and we're going to go back and forth a little bit here, but to me, SourcePoint Press, really, my goal with this is to exist as a publisher for people that want all the benefits of self-publishing combined with all the benefits of having a publisher behind them that can help raise their stock, get them into distribution, and build a greater brand awareness for them.
Can maybe you talk a bit about, for those of in our audience who are maybe unaware of what those challenges are? We live and breathe this stuff, right? We independent press, alternative press, the people who are making comics that are not giant mega conglomerates. We know what those challenges are, but can you maybe just spend a few minutes talking about what it's like to be on your own in self-publishing versus having a crew like SourcePoint?
The self-publishing world is a tough one because there are a lot of actually people self-publishing. There's a lot of tools, more tools than ever before to be able to. So to be able to stand out amongst that crowd, to be able to show people that you have a unique voice worth listening to, that you have a level of quality that others don't. There's a reputation that's lacked that keeps you stuck in this pool. When you do partner with a publisher, I hate to say it, but there is a level of clout that comes with that, that knows that you've at least been vetted by one round of something that has a trustworthy voice in this space. So SourcePoint Press has always had a pretty consistent tone in that if you knew that you liked one type of title, regardless of what this one might be, it looks completely different, it's a different genre even. If it's a SourcePoint comic, you're probably going to like it because it's going to be in a certain flavor. And having that, knowing that you can be a part of that, immediately puts a lot more eyes on your product. But also, there's certain avenues in this that we've already tried and failed and improved upon and worked out and problem solved over a course of years. So you're getting a giant amount of experience that has your back, that helps you navigate through all sorts of things, especially when it comes to the quality of the end result, like weird little things that you wouldn't know about as a self-publisher, especially when it comes to like printing and pre-press and production and design, and having that kind of final edit sweep, and then having that there's a stamp of approval beyond your own that went on this work, something that actually counts in the eyes of the readers who say, you know what, out of all the indie stuff out there, I'm willing to give this one a try because SourcePoint was willing to give this one a try.
I've been published over the last 20 years by Image Comics, by Devil's Due, and then, making a home at SourcePoint for the last number of years. But even through that, I've still largely considered myself kind of like a self-publisher with benefits in a way, because I use publishers for distribution and getting access to better printing rates and things like that. And I have talked to a lot of my peers about SourcePoint and things like that, and things that we can offer them, not in terms of what Josh was talking about, but the financial aspects of it, in terms of the limited marketing, but still marketing we can do, but also things like printing cost and print brokering and things like that Josh has built up through the years with his connection to SourcePoint and things like that. And I say this to say, putting on my right or wrong hat for a moment here, I am shooketh by how many people are overpaying for printing that should know better.
I know.
Devastates me, and it's like,
I know.
What you're paying for 200 books, you could be getting 500 to 1,000. And then someone just this week in Baltimore told me, yeah, but then I got to keep them all in my garage or my basement. And I'm like, not if you can get them into distribution through a publisher that has a certain amount of known pedigree. And have you done Kickstarter? Have you done, and suddenly, yeah, you're printing 750 or 1,000 books, but now you're moving a couple hundred through distribution. You can move a couple hundred through Kickstarter. You can get on the road. Your number shrinks, and you're allowing yourself to keep going and make this financially viable. And that's some of the other experience we offer on top of all the other perks.
And then you have, because of the unique model, there's also a series of added benefits where you essentially, there's certain pros and cons to getting, creator-owned publishing deal with a publishing company and self-publishing. And most of the advantage of self-publishing is having control over your own IP and its future and what you do with it and how you expand it into other mediums. Regardless of a creator-owned contract with a publisher, you don't get to keep all of those rights. There's always going to be something in your contract that maintains some sort of right over your IP. And it's going to be a partnership right where one can't do anything without the other, but that continues to tie your hands about what you can do. You have to have another party sign off, and that can be used as leverage against you in the future in the case of something not going well between you and the publisher. So we take all that away, and you get the best of both worlds. You get to keep all of the same rights that you would if you were self-publishing, and then you get the advantages of publishing to the point where you get to continue growing as an entrepreneur, knowing that you're also getting mailbox money for work that you're not having to do, that someone else is doing for you. It's kind of just the best of both worlds.
Yeah, it's the deal that I've always wanted for myself, and I've negotiated for myself. And I've told many creators this deal, that people that have seen our publishing agreement, I think it's like the third bullet point in there is, you can cancel this publishing agreement at any time.
It's the cleanest publishing agreement I've ever seen.
Yeah, I have so many lawyers on speed dial. It's like I just don't want people to have to deal with that, But when it comes down to is, I've told people, I said, look, if Scholastic comes in and wants to pick up your Source Point Press book, I would love if you would stay with us. But if we're going to be the Sub Pop to your Nirvana, so be it. We don't want to keep you if you don't want to be here. If you have grown past what we're offering you, and it's better if you go somewhere else, go. We all know the horror stories of these publishers that are literally holding people's books hostage, or holding their money hostage. Or, oh, you got a television deal in play? Well, I have to be the executive producer. No. Man, no. I got enough of my own stuff going on. I don't need to be worried about that stuff.
Does that not limit the growth of SourcePoint then? I mean, all of these companies are choosing that as a value for their company, right? It allows them to get new investors, new partners, all of those things. They say, look, we have pieces of all of this stuff. And you're right. Those contracts, there's so many different ways to take a little bit of ownership or a whole lot of control, or as Josh mentioned, leverage over them that you can continue to use later on. But that is just to put a completely pragmatic business hat on, that does allow you to gain some value in the company. Don't you limit your company's value that way?
I will make money off of my books.
Depends on your goals, right? It depends on who's on the other side of that publishing deal. It really does matter what is their goal. And in this case, the goal is not to essentially prey upon creators. It's to boost them up.
I have seen so many publishers fall into exactly what you're talking about, Adam. About how, we need to be value added. We need to be this. Newsflash, I'm not looking for investors, right? Not my goal. I'm not looking, like John said, to make money off the other creators. I have spent a lot of my own money to get this started, to give other creators an avenue. People can believe that or not. I don't care. No offense. I love comics, and we have 40 books lined up right now, and before we even open submission guidelines. And you've seen it, Adam. I'm not
amazing. I know. The schedule it's dense, and it's got some real bangers in it. It's heavy hitters. It's going to be, it's got some really fascinating titles. I'm looking forward to talking some more about that. I think you guys have done an amazing job of putting together a deep list already. And you're right. You haven't even, as far as I know, opened up the floodgates. And I'm sure once those are open, you're going to spend a lot of time on incoming.
Well, people hearing this too, right? People hearing this interview. But here's the thing. I had the same conversation in Baltimore with a very established creator. He's like, well, how are you going to make money? And I said, how am I going to make money? By selling my books. How's the company going to make money? I said, ideally, if we continue to put out good books and allow creators to continue to get success and we build the viability of the brand awareness, the company will ultimately make a little money, but I'm not interested in building my financial long-term stability on other people's work. I want the company to pay for itself. I'd like to be able to get Josh a little money, maybe myself a little money for my time, but I'm not looking to like turn around and sell this company to someone else because I want to remain, and you heard this in a certain dinner we had, Adam, fiercely independent. We need this. We need a publisher who's independent, who's going to let creators control their own destiny, walk when they want, use us for what they need us for, and then just make comics.
As someone who's been a part of like numerous startups and been in situations with money and without money, I can say that and this is to creators, like as a very unbiased take, like if you are looking at publishers and you're trying to get published, you're trying to figure out the deal that works for you, and you find that certain publishers have been injected with money and investors, and this gives them a bigger reach and a higher profile, you have to also take into consideration, this is, in my experience, never not the case. All money that is pushed into a company comes with strings attached to it. There is no like injections of cash into comic publishers that don't manipulate all of the actions of those comic book publishers that no longer make it about you. It's not about the creator's best interest. That is not part of the business plan. Is how well does this writer and artist get to live a better life than they did yesterday is not part of what they're trying to do or achieve. And that is strictly just how capitalism works. I hate to say it, it's not a bad thing unless you're really looking for a partner that is really actually trying to, just work with you and not necessarily find a way to collect IPs and collect, properties to try to sell them to, different avenues as part of this 20 years, scheme for making money.
And I'll say one more thing about this topic too, because again, I know people are like waiting for the but or the if. In full transparency, if we publish Josh Werner's next graphic novel, which I know about and is going to be amazing, and SourcePoint publishes that book, it's going to bring more eyes to SourcePoint, and more people might look at my next book. They might look at the books of all the other creators. And that high tide will raise everyone up a little bit, and then everyone could potentially make a little more money off of their own stuff by being as part of this collaborative, under the SourcePoint label. That's the full. I mean, that's why we can't publish every good book, and we can't. We got to be selective. But we just want to rise together, and that's going to be it.
Hopefully, that kind of puts some people's minds at ease too about the opposite idea. So some people love the idea that a company is made by creators because they understand being a creator and what it's like and their needs. But other people think that gives them some sort of opportunity to create a vanity press or opportunity to try to use stand on the backs of the other creators. But that is most definitely not the case with SourcePoint. The whole point is to bring other people up collectively.
Yes.
And that is the benefit to the creators behind the company, like as creators. So like that itch gets scratched. It's not a selfless thing to help each other. And then people they're so black and white about it that they don't see it that way.
Yeah,
they think, it's either selfish or or it's impossible. Like no, it can be both things. Like I can help you, and it can also benefit me.
Symbiotic relationship, right? Everyone's goal, every creator's goal should be have the book that raises the tide for every other book. And how you do that? You put out the best book. How do you put out the best book? The book that's most uniquely you and your team.
I love that. I love that so much. I want to get. I'd love to circle back around this, but I also know that we're conscious of time, so I want to dig a little bit deeper into the two of you individually, not just as a group. So let's start with you, Josh, if you don't mind. Put you in the hot seat here for a minute. Looking back, we like to do a lot of research for this podcast. We like to get to know who our guests are a little bit. So I want to talk to you about what may be a high point of your career. What can you tell us about UFO, the Otis Files?
Oh my God. I wasn't expecting that.
Oh!
Yeah, so those who don't know, I have I don't know, like 36 IMDb credits or something like that, and they're various stuff. Most of it's art stuff. It's like I worked on storyboards or concept art or props for the film, or did the poster or the cover, things like that. But on occasion, so I have acted in a bunch of things, and that was, believe it or not, that film was actually very, very like OG Source Point related.
Yeah.
So the original co-founder of Source Point Press was Trico Lutkins, and Trico wanted to make this film, but he didn't want to direct it, and he had written this comedy script, the screenplay, and that he thought wouldn't really work because it was as a comic, because it was so documentary leaning, and so he pulled in two directors actually that co-directed it, and we brought in my dear friend David C. Hayes, who has been in every bad movie ever made. He's got over 100 acting credits. He's written, produced, directed. He's done it all, and he's the most prolific famous person you'll ever meet. It's kind of incredible. But yeah, so he starred in it, and my particular role in it is embarrassingly, ridiculously funny and dumb. It's just absolutely dumb.
Okay, well, I wasn't able to, by press time, I wasn't able to find it. But, maybe we'll dig a little deeper.
I think
see
it's
if we can.
completely out of distro. I own it on DVD, but I think it's...
Oh, yeah?
I'm pretty sure it's completely out of distro, and I think it might be because there weren't... Some of the locations in the film don't have paperwork for them. So I think it got to a point where it couldn't be in distro anymore. And also, we had a scene where we got some cops in there in the shot that didn't sign any papers, I think, too. So it was very punk
Guerrilla
rock.
filmmaking.
Yeah.
I have a few guerrilla producer credits. We did some filmmaking back in the day. I know that feeling. It's fun though. That's what there's an energy there that also feels a lot like comics, right? Is that how you got involved into the comics world? Where were your first steps?
I was a big comic fan growing up, and then I went to art school, and everybody in art school is like, don't go into comics, as long just like this, don't do that, and so all these instructors are doing that, and at the same time I was kind of just doomed at that point. I ended up switching schools to a school that had a lot of comic creators who were instructors, and then I took a bunch of classes on comics, and when I got out, I ended up in fashion design, and I was working insane hours for a bunch of different fashion lines, and I fell backwards into that. That was by mistake. But I was working in a creative field within 6 months of graduating. What are you going to do? You take what you get. And then I started building SourcePoint on the side as kind of a small thing, and then it grew and grew till I ended up having to eventually leave that job. But first, I had to negotiate changes in hours. I need convention seasons off, and I'll work 7 days a week during the winter, weird stuff. But that all kind of happened through freelance. I was freelancing in the industry. It started off, I was doing illustrations for novels and books, and then I was doing a lot of band work, band posters and T-shirts. And then Gary Reed gave me some work in publishing. And at the time, so for those who don't know, Gary Reed was kind of a legendary, not only Michigan, indie comics creator, but the guy who lifted up every indie voice in comics today.
True.
And he had a company called Caliber Comics that was just a huge legendary company. By this point in his life, Caliber was done, but he couldn't stay out of the game. He was working with IDW on some stuff. He had Desperado, he had Binary, and he pulled me in on his little companies that he was doing, and then he pulled me into some IDW work because at the time they were publishing Dead World, a long-running zombie series that he was a writer for. And I ended up getting the bug, and I was so inspired by his legacy and everything that he had done for creators. He was the original Image Comics. He was doing creator-owned comics, and where creators got to keep their rights, and he launched all these creators to work at Marvel and DC. Tons of the names at the biggest names all started there. And it's kind of amazing how much historically he got left in the dust. There shouldn't be a comics documentary made without him being discussed, and
No
it's a
question.
shame that he gets missed sometimes.
No, I'm sure that's going to come back. Actually, we're in the at Prana. We're actually in the process of helping Joe Pruitt relaunch Desperado Publishing. So we're in that. We've already had one release out on a Kickstarter, and we're going to be looking for other distribution on that. And we've got another long list going.
Joe Pruitt used to work at Caliber back in the day.
He sure did.
He's one of the OGs too. He's a legend in his own right.
Yeah, it's that whole history is just so rich with innovators and incredible work that it just did launch so many different careers. But when I went I was able to find 38 credits for you, and who knows if there's more or less, but I believe that, including one that I just want to talk about briefly, and then we'll get to Dirk because we do have a limited time today. But I got to tell you, one of my favorite of all time like tourist destinations I've ever been to was the Winchester Mystery House. And that's really high up. When you look at some of your more successful works, this is always high up on that list. Tell me about that work, and tell the audience about why that place is so interesting.
Yeah, so I'm just a huge fan of like haunted history and and architecture and like old Gothic mansions and the like. And that house, I've been infatuated with the history behind that house for a long time. And that house has become known around the world. People visit it from they do tours, so people visit it from all over. It was the inspiration for Stephen King's Rose Red. It was the inspiration for a lot of Edgar Allan Poe stories. Shirley Jackson's Haunting of Hill House was inspired by that house. Even Disney's Haunted Mansion is based on that house.
Oh, shoot. Really?
They've all cited it as their inspo. It's like the original American Gothic mansion. And we got to a point at Source Point, so I had kind of stepped aside from being a creator because my hands were so incredibly full. We were doing 15 titles a month at the time. And we were also running a game publishing company simultaneously. So I and a game designer pitched a game, a Winchester Mystery House game, to the house. And we ended up meeting, going down there and meeting with the licensors and meeting with the people who handle the Sarah Winchester estate. And through this process, they came to realize that I knew a lot about the house, like way more than the average person. And because there's a lot of, it's so popular and common that there's a lot of misconceptions about it that people get wrong. Like the surface level trivia is not accurate. It's like the hardcore people know, And so they were really impressed, and they had all these questions for me about, oh, that's really interesting. What did you think of the movie? And I felt like I was being tested. At the time, Helen Mirren was starred in this movie called Winchester that was on Netflix for quite a while, so a lot of people probably saw it. Well, a lot of people who were really big fans of the house, they didn't love the film. They had critiques. Everyone agreed that Helen Mirren was phenomenal in the role, that there was some great acting, and the other thing that fans agreed on was the visual aesthetic accuracy. The interior shots, the exterior shots were of the real house. The interior shots were rebuilt, but they were rebuilt as accurate as possible to each room. So those were sets, but they were really good sets. Everything else, script-wise, it was clearly a simple cash-in on a horror haunted house movie, and it didn't hold a lot of accuracy even when there was opportunities to do so. So they asked me my thoughts on it, and I had to stop and think for a second, and they said, well, one, you can't tell that story in a movie. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, the story of the house covers a span of decades, and it's meant to be told in episodes, like, periodically. There's moments throughout that you walked into that film with the house already being built. It was like all the famous rooms were already done. You don't know the stories behind how they got there and what Sarah was doing. And so I had said that there's different levels and stages throughout history. You can't just pick the end of her life and act like that's the most important one. And they said, well, how would you go about it? And I said, well, honestly, a television series would be ideal. I said, but with the bigger jumps in time, I said a comic book would make the most sense. And they were like, don't you do comics? Isn't that your thing? Like, I was like, oh, well, yeah, but we were here to meet about a game. I was like, wasn't thinking about that. And they said, they were like, maybe we could expand this deal, and maybe we could give you the license to do a comic properly. Because at this time, there'd been some unlicensed comics that they were not fans of, because they're the keepers of Sarah's story. And one of the big downfalls of people who don't know the history very well is they treat Sarah like she was mentally ill, and they don't portray her. There's so much to her. She's a fascinating, phenomenal person that there was missing from all these tales, and somebody needed to do it right. So they ended up tasking SourcePoint with this, but they wanted, it was a tight partnership. They wanted scripts and ideas in advance, and they wanted us to come up with everything. And I said, well, I have to find a writer. And they're like, no, like we approve you for the writer. I was like, I don't have time for that right now. I was like, let me find somebody. They're like, if you can find someone who cares about Sarah Winchester as much as you do, and you bring them to us, and we sit down and we have a conversation like that with them, they're like, then we'll sign off on somebody else.
You talked yourself into a gig you couldn't talk yourself out of. That's really funny.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, right there, that's the history of the past and present of SourcePoint Press. People talking themselves into jobs, unable to back out of it. Why don't you do this with the company? Blah, 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 blah.
Dirk, let's talk about the man of mystery, Dirk Manning, the man behind the mask, if we will. When I look, I had 20 plus credits for you, including Right or Wrong, which was a big piece of your work. Tell us about what Right or Wrong was.
Yeah, Right or Wrong was a column that I started for Newsarama when I was first starting to publish comics online. My mantra when I got started making comics, and we talk about like the hidden history, like Caliber and things like that, and
sure.
I've said this a lot privately, and I guess I might as well say it publicly now, is I know the real history of a lot of this comics that won't be written, and one of those things will be that Nightmare World, my first comic series, was one of the first fully realized comics published online. I then went from that to then writing Right or Wrong for Newsarama as a column about, here's this guy, here I am, and I am starting, I'm a writer who can't draw, I can't even draw a crooked line, I love comics, I love the medium, and I want to make comics. I'm going to tell you about my journey and what I'm learning along the way. So, Right or Wrong ended up becoming this cultural touchstone, I think, for a lot of people. I rarely go to a major comic convention and don't have someone see like the picture of Dirk Manning with a top hat and the scarf, my banner. I used to wear a pin because people didn't know what I really looked like, so I had the pin of Dirk Manning. But like people that have written for like major comics for Marvel and DC have come up to me and said, I read Right or Wrong, and I used to print those columns out, and now I'm writing Venom. Now I'm drawing Superman or whatever it is they're doing, But that was the point of the column. I always said, if I get to the point of making comics, I will do everything I can to help other people make comics. And what was interesting is, as I continued to write the column, I got on Images Radar. Right when I wrapped up Nightmare World as an online series, I was able to take Nightmare World as an online comic, and because of the popularity of Right or Wrong, I was able to then move Nightmare World into syndication with the Shadowline online comic hub with Image. It's funny, Jim Valentino was like, well, you're not big on horror stuff, but you get so much attention, I'll give this a shot. Within 1 month, Nightmare World was the #1 read comic on their online hub, and it stayed that way for all 2 years of syndication. So now, that allowed me to parlay Nightmare World into print through Image Comics, which I then also talked about in Right or Wrong, right? So it was like literally people watching this ascension of this like piss and vinegar, no-name guy from the Midwest who bought a domain name back when that was a big deal and started publishing 2 pages of a comic a week every Thursday to do a new 8-page story every month. And how do you market yourself? How do you get on the road? It's why I've never changed the Dirk Manning look, and why that's always been my logo. Is the guy in the top hat and the scarf, which, spoiler, I don't wear a top hat and scarf in real life, right? But Right or Wrong was really a long-running chronicle of that journey in real time. And my one rule in right or wrong, which may not sound like a big deal, but as I said, I will always be transparent. What I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong, when I'm screwing up, and right or wrong, and then coming full circle to a conversation earlier, I eventually wanted to take those columns when Newsarama kind of shut down and rebooted itself and a lot of the content was lost. I did take the column to Bleeding Cool for a minute, but I wanted to capture that early phase of the columns and rework them into a book. But I also wanted to be able to make sure that I could keep the integrity of the work what it was. As a fiercely independent guy, I don't want people to say, well, don't say that about this publisher, or don't say this. No, I mean, I'm not ever out to bag anybody, but I just want to keep it real. Enter Gary Reed. Gary Reed, who was started, I don't know if you remember, that's Transfusion, which was like another one of his sub-imprints. And Gary and I wanted to work together, and I said, look, I want to take Right or Wrong as the columns, rework them into a book, but I want it to be under a publisher that will let me do it exactly the way I want. And Gary's like, you can do whatever you want with me. It's the only time in my life I've ever signed a book, committed to a book deal on a handshake, because that's the kind of guy Gary was.
Yeah.
Right. And just this past 2 weeks ago in New York, I was at an after hours event, and this blew my mind, man. This blew my mind. This creator comes up to me and goes, "Oh, you're Dirk Manning," and I go, "Yeah, that's me." I was kind of wince, like, what are they going to do next, right? But but he goes, "I read Right or Wrong as a kid in the Philippines, and now I'm making comics." And with the book, the second edition that now has been published by SourcePoint Press at New York this year, when I was at my table, a guy walked up to my table and said, "You may not remember me." He goes, "But we talked a year ago and I bought Right or Wrong." And I kind of remembered him. I'm like, "Yeah." I go, "Yeah, help me out." He goes, "Well, I just wanted to tell you, I wrote my first book and my agent is shopping it right now after I read Right or Wrong."
Oh man.
I used to have a shelf. Now I have a box of books. And this always makes me tear up, so I'm not trying to be cute, but this always gives me that books that people have given me that they wrote because they read Right or Wrong. And that's my reminder about that importance of paying it forward, the importance of just, giving people the opportunities. I've been so fortunate. And I've made a ton of mistakes, too. Tons of mistakes. But
Sure.
you learn from those, too, and then you grow. And what you do is you continue to then put your best foot forward, grow, evolve, adapt, and continue to pay it forward, which is how, when this whole thing with SourcePoint Press came about, I joked about Josh working himself into a job. That's what I ended up doing with SourcePoint Press. When SourcePoint was looking to potentially sunset, and I went to Travis and Josh and said, "Look, don't sunset the company. Here's all the stuff you can do. I know there's all this crazy stuff going on right now, blah, 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 blah." And I laid out like this whole agenda. And Travis was like, stroking his big red beard, and he goes, this is the constant Travis McIntyre. He goes, "So why don't you do it?" And at that moment, I realized something. For 20 plus years with Right or Wrong, I've talked about paying it forward. I've talked about helping other people my mantra again was, if I'm ever making comics, and I've done over 20 creator-owned graphic novels in my career, that I would do everything I could to help other people make comics. And here's a publisher, and I know we're going to get into it in a minute, I'm sure,
Yeah.
that was sunsetting. And I had the opportunity to come in and relaunch it. And that little Dirk Manning in my head said, "Did you mean it? Are you really willing to now pay it forward again? Not just write the book and say, here, for $20, I'll tell you everything I need to, I know."
You mentioned a dinner that we went to with a mutual admiration of both of us, a man named Gary Vaynerchuk. And one of the some of the things that he talks about that I wish I had listened to earlier in my career were things like just constant self-promotion. Another column that was written back then, a man named Larry Young used to say that all promotion is self-promotion. And I was stuck with me all these years. And you've done an amazing job of doing that and building a personal brand around the work that you're doing. And I would say that that's the one, even before I knew you personally, I've always admired the fact that plenty of things that you've done, that you've been such a road warrior, and you've done such a good job of like building that sort of persona even first. I think it's been admirable, but again, don't want to spend too much time blowing smoke up your ass.
Yeah, but Larry was one of the guys I looked up to, and I'm looking right here. Like, this is the part of my office no one ever sees on camera, is like my books and comic book rebels and comic book sequential art, understanding comics.
Sure.
Guess who else is on that shelf?
True Facts. There you go. Pulled it out right there. It was right back there. Let's deal with, I want to get into the history of SourcePoint. We talked a bit about how it started, but I want to jump straight to the end, because this is something that when we talk about SourcePoint, we've talked about our partnership with you, is something that people bring up. And Josh, we should really focus this in, I think, on you, because you were there and you've been there obviously since the beginning. SourcePoint did at some point declare bankruptcy. And as we have learned over and over and over again recently, bankruptcies suck. Like, they suck for everybody. They suck for the debtors. They suck for the vendors. They suck for, obviously, the owners. But I would say that can you talk to me about how that went down and what maybe some of the causes of that? What are some of the lessons learned?
When all this started happening, it always happens when it looks like things are really going well. So we started experiencing this rapid growth, and to do that, to continue that rapid growth, we had to hire people. So we had this a big group of people working in, and then of course the overhead got crazy because we had to get a big building for all these people, and they became like family that we had to kind of protect through this, and it was probably the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life, was watching the numbers plummet at a time when we had just taken our biggest risks, right? So you take the next step, like when success is happening, people think that there's money, but in reality, success comes with next steps, and the next steps are the more expensive self-investment that you've ever had. So the money is always gone. It's never there, right? It's always putting into it. And because our growth trajectory was continuing that path, we followed it. And then, the pandemic hit, and we went the way of so many other, peers. We actually held out, I think, the longest. I think everybody had a bankruptcy under their belt before we even decided we had no choice. But during that time, it got really, really hard. We went through, I won't bore everybody with a ton of details, but there was a whole series of separate events. You can't even blame it on one thing. But we were victims of fraud twice for pretty massive amounts of money that we lost at a time when we were trying to launch a whole new product line for a toy line. We were trying to expand into toys, which is for those who know and have been there and at that step, it's an extremely expensive step to take, and it was really scary. Everything crumbled kind of all at the same time. And at that time, we had a ton of the gears were churning. We had 2 years worth of contracts out at the highest amount of books out per month we'd ever seen. We were losing money on comics when paper prices skyrocketed. We actually lost our margin. And what we did to protect the creators in that scenario was, instead of a profit split, which would mean, hey, we sold thousands of copies of your comic, here's your check for $0 because we made no money on it. We changed everybody's contracts to a guaranteed percentage of MSRP, regardless of what it sold for, regardless of how much profit there was, or if there even was profit. We literally got to a point where we were upside down on our creators and our own team. So now we're borrowing money to pay salaries, we're borrowing money to pay royalties at a time when we were waiting for the profits to come back. But because of everything was going out, we had to trim like crazy. So I had just lined up, at the time, I personally was writing several different series, and we had brought on a ton of licensed IPs, pretty big licenses. and I was in charge of a bunch of those. At the same time, Gerk was also in charge of a whole section of licenses. His were making it out though. We ended up canceling all of the license IPs that I was working on and a whole slew of in-house books. So at the time, when you're creating books with creators who are bringing the work to the table, they're not receiving in every scenario. They're not receiving like page rates, right? They're working for themselves and they're keeping their rights, and, or some variation of their percentage of their rights. And then we pay for the printing, and we take the risk on the overage and all this stuff. The risk that they put in is their time and their team, and then the risk we would put in is kind of like everything else. How much do we spend on marketing on this book? Will we see the return? And regardless, no matter what, every copy that went out the door, we have to pay this creator, even if we don't have any money. That got bad fast. Turns out there's like a reason why people don't try to be that fair. It can really wreck you as a company. So what we ended up doing is we started falling behind on bills, and it got really, really scary. Because we got to a point where the faucets were on, off. And during that time, there was a decision like what to do with the money. And I would say, if I don't get this print run out the door, we can't delay this title another month. Because our projected sales for the following issue will be like half of what they were, and that will actually make the problem worse. So there is not a lot of places where you can kick the can down the road. So what we ended up doing was eventually we got in over our skis, and I want people to try to understand too. This is a different company that we're talking about. So at the time, SourcePoint Press was not a company. SourcePoint Press was a brand. It was a brand owned by Oxide Media. Oxide Media was the company that was in financial trouble. Our game company was a brand. Our toy company was a brand. So Oxide Media is the actual company that, if you're mad, that's the company you're mad at. During that time, keep in mind we have really complicated contracts. Like really, at this point in time, we have like stage 5 versions of creator-owned deals because we were also doing media. We had like half a dozen titles were already like in the hands of studios and optioned, and we're looking for funding. We had Rotten Tail movie out. We had a movie in the works with Lionsgate. It was getting complicated. And these are all great things for growth. It doesn't necessarily mean they're great for money. So the downfall of a company like that, and the big thing we were really afraid of, was tying up everybody's rights. So we saw this happen. I won't name names, but we saw this happen with so many of our peers. People we really respected. They got to a bad spot. All of a sudden, they had no choice but to close the doors and shut up, and then watch the massive mob come hunting for them. And they always look like the bad guys. And we were starting to see for ourselves how this can happen. When you start talking to the bankruptcy attorneys, what you learn is when you get money, you don't get to just hand it to the loudest person in the room asking for it. The one who's crucifying you online is not the first in the line. We decide now where the money goes. And that's like how the process works, right? So we started the process, started recognizing that big banks were going to be the first to start getting paid over creators. At that point in time, we immediately halted the bankruptcy. And we decided to find alternative ways as a company to start paying back creators for fear that if the bankruptcy continued, that every creator would get screwed. And in the end, there wouldn't be enough money for everybody, and they would be last in line, and we wanted them to be first in line. So we delayed our bankruptcy for a year and a half, and during that year and a half, we have made payments for missing page rates and for royalties every single month. That money is, we're not able to continue, like as Oxide Media, not able to continue putting out books. We can't spend new money at this point in the stage of the debt. You can't spend money, and you have to spend money to make money. It's a big conundrum, right? So now we're at the liquidating phase. We're at the selling off assets phase. We're at the in-house IPs starting to get tied up in somewhat, assigning, as like judges look at assigning values to them and figuring out if they need to sell them to then pay a bank and things like that. So we held back and we started assigning our own values. We started doing what we could legally before entering to show in good faith that we were trying to pay down debt, but we were trying to pay down the debt prioritized our way, and we prioritize the creators first. At this point, almost every creator has been either paid back financially or signed off on some sort of deal. And the deal usually involved, for those, because I don't want anyone to think that there's some predatory stuff going on. It's very handshake discussion type stuff. And it is, okay, this is where we're at with royalties. This is what we're projecting, how long it would take for you to be able to get caught up on those. Here's what we have of yours. So like, we own all these books that have your name on it. Can we trade some of this for money? Can we trade your media rights that were tied up with your contract for, not for money, but for debt, being crossed off, essentially, IOUs, or whatever you want to call it, just trade it back so that the debt can go down. And so it's become a really, really long process of working with every individual creator. And we're like in the final stages now where the bankruptcy is not over. It's now like actually going, because we were able to get so much of that down. And that was not easy. And trust me when I say no one's gonna thank you for any of that. You're only gonna have horrible things to say. And I get it. If from their perspective, what they see is they'd be like, wait a minute, you sold my books and then you stopped paying me. What happened to my money? Where's the money that customer's money went in somebody's hand? Where did it end up? And they have no concept that it never even made it to us. Like, we're so in deep at this point. But it's a long, horrible process, and there's a lot of, it's a small industry.
I do think that there's, so as Dirk said, I think it's a really fine thing that you're doing, in that trying to go back and refine that system, that brand value, to bring back these creators to the forefront. I just want to ask actually one quick question before we leave this subject. Dirk, you've talked a lot about wanting to, pay it forward and use what you have learned to grow others. Why choose this brand that is so? That obviously you have a hurdle to jump over in using it.
Sure.
Why not just begin anew?
Yeah, to parlay between your question and what Josh said, I just want to be very transparent. I don't think any creator with SourcePoint was owed more money than me. And I'm not saying that's not a humble brag. That's not, but I had a lot of books tied up with.
To think about it, it's realistic because of how prolific you've been.
Right. I think I had
10 books were moving at every angle. So there's obviously there's certain amount that's definitely owed to you first. Yeah.
And I had to pay my artists to make those books and then make my money back on sales, which the money then disappeared because of this whole process Josh talked about.
Right.
So I say that to preface what I'm about to say to you, Adam, and to answer your question about why would I bring back a brand that could have left a really bad taste in my mouth too? It's because I believe in the power of what's, and I might piss some people off saying this, but then if I do, so be it.
Yeah.
I think SourcePoint Press drifted from what it was when it was most beloved. When SourcePoint started, there's certain things people equated with SourcePoint. Cutting edge voices, instantly accessible comic books and graphic novels, a strong creator forward publisher with a strong convention presence. And then to Josh's point, and I'm not trying to kick some other down, but then they got into toys and IPs and they made some cool stuff. Winchester Mystery House was incredible. Some of the other things that never fully came out were amazing.
Yeah.
But that also wasn't what people associated SourcePoint Press with. And when I found out that the legacy of the company was going to end, potentially liquidating into nothing, and I saw the potential there for that brand, and I said, you know what? If we can pick this up and dust it off a little bit, and just go back to our roots. And if I've said that once in conversations with Josh and Travis before we did this, I probably said 1,000 times. Go back, and I said this even before when things are getting bad. Go back to our roots. Go back to our roots. Go back to our roots. As a self-published guy that worked with publishers 20 plus years, there's ways creators can make money, and if creators are making some money, the publisher can make enough money to at least stay solvent. Sure. But that doesn't involve having 30 staff, and that doesn't involve a giant building. And again, I'm not trying to kick them when they're down. I'm just being real because people have questions. I saw value in what SourcePoint once stood for and could stand for and now will stand for again. I think Josh said it perfectly. SourcePoint wasn't the company. It was a brand under Oxide Media. I said, come here, baby. Come here. Come here. And I took the brand and dusted off. And they said, we're going to bring you back.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, Adam, and you saw this too. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I will say at Retailer Day at New York Comic Con,
Yep.
so many people were excited to hear SourcePoint Press is going back to the roots.
Yeah.
And now we can provide that opportunity to other creators to, again, exist in that model we talked about earlier. And now we can pay it forward. And now we can grow things. And there's value in that name, and there's value in what it stood for. I'm not trying to crap all over that third act of the old SourcePoint. But it wasn't what the company was beloved for, respectfully. That's what I want to get back to. And it's not going to be for everybody. It's not going to be for every creator. It's not going to be for every reader. But for the people that want cutting edge, sharp, comics with a sharp edge, horror, speculative fiction, pulp, science fiction, man, we got you. And we're bringing in creators who get to own their own destiny. We got you. Now, do you have to be at a certain place in your career to publish with us? Just from a financial standpoint, and yeah, but we can also help you get there too. So that's why I believe. And the last thing is, and I don't want to sound like I'm, blowing smoke, but you kind of, were very generous to me earlier. So let me say this: that I said I would lead this, and I will bring it back. I'll blow the dust off, and we'll move it forward. But what was my one condition? I said you got to be involved. I said because not only for your expertise, but you are the heart and soul of this company. And Josh's expertise, but also I could not pick this brand up and run with it without the guy that helped make it what it was. And like I told Josh before we got on this call, at Retailer Day, people were so excited to hear SourcePoint Press is coming back. I was a very tiny piece of that. That guy is the heart and soul of what that brand stood for. Yeah, you. and to bring that back with Josh involved, and then, we all have different skill sets, right? But I believe in the power of the brand. I believe in the infrastructure that was built originally. And, I spent a lot of money to do this, but you know what? Am I going to be the guy that talks about paying it forward and just writes a column once in a while and says, buy the book for $20? Or am I going to be the guy that's done this for 23 years and overcome so many obstacles, some self-inflicted and some systemically inflicted, to say, if you are creating comics, this is an avenue that will help you manage your own destiny. And
when you think about how full circle that is, that also means that this would be a really good time to relaunch Right or Wrong, because these are like new endeavors in real time that you could actually be like, listen, all that stuff I learned before, I'm still learning. Let's do this now, and I'll teach you along the way. Like it's this circle also starts again.
I don't have enough to do.
Just my thoughts.
Hey, Josh, I'm holding up one finger under the desk. Guess which one it is? No,
that sounds like a really great. Since Gerk has once again talked himself into yet another job, I think that probably is a good place for us to bring this thing into a landing before the two of you launch another company before the end of this. Yeah. I want to say thank you both for being involved with this. Thank you for trusting Prana Publishers with your distribution. We're looking forward to working with you. And thank you both for your passion, not only for comics just in general, but also for using the power of comics to amplify those other voices. I think that's not only commendable, but is exactly why we started our company and why we continue to do this podcast, is people like that. So Thank you both for being here, and thanks for being on the path towards righteousness.
Well,
We may not be there yet,
right.
but we're on our way.
Right. It was all a matter of perspective right now. But thank you for what you do, and thank you for being a good partner in this process, and giving us this platform. It's hard to talk about bankruptcy. It's hard to talk about some of the mistakes that are made and things like that, and the transparency necessary to launch something like this. But we do it because we love it. And if you love comics too, and if you're a creator, and people go to sourcepointpress.com, see our offensively transmission submission stuff on there. It's offensively transparent. It's just there's no. This is what it is, right? You're allergic to transparency. I'm sorry, I got you. No, but we appreciate you giving us this platform to talk about it, because
all the hagglers would be like, "Where was the foreplay?" I was hoping we'd have to argue first.
But people need to know, and people need to know this is a new day moving forward, and everything's right there on the website, sourcepointpress.com, and we're just really excited to be partnering with Prana. Like I said, right now at this moment, we have 40 graphic novels lined up to be distributed in partnership with Prana through Lunar and our other avenues. So if you want to jump in. We're going, and we love comics. We're doing this because we love comics.
That's an excellent call to action. I have one more. If you're this deep in the conversation, you obviously like these kinds of things. So maybe a like and subscribe. Maybe that alert button so you know when the live show goes on. Anyway, thank you, Dirk. Thank you, Josh, not only for being here, but for what you do. And we're looking forward to working with you guys.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you.
All right. Now it's day, y'all.
Oh, that's a big one.